Vanderbilt is gaining respect slowly, but they're gaining respect. The belief is there. But now, are they going to back it up? We're going to answer that question. Locked on Vandy starts now.
You are Locked on Vandy, your daily podcast on the Vanderbilt Commodores. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome into the Locked on Vandy podcast on the Locked on Podcast Network. I'm your host, Corey Burton. Thanks for making Locked on Vandy your first listen each and every day. Shout out to the everydayers. Shout out to however you got here, however you're watching or listening. Thank you and keep it up. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as a part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day and everywhere. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So this show is going to be action-packed for y'all, man, and you guys act like you're surprised. This show's always action-packed, man, but there's some serious belief in this team, and the media members are slowly taking note. And this team could be starting to back it up, too. Defense is going to be more loaded/talented. You can see some very interesting storylines there. Eli Stowers is getting a lot of attention. Mock drafts, lists, all the lists, all SECs and the All Americans. But most recently, a notable SEC analyst has been gave him some major props there. But it's really Diego Pavia that's putting all this out there and on the forefront. He's been doing most of the, I don't know what you call it, but he's been putting all of this information out there. He's been cutting it WWE promo style for most of it. But the question is this. We know the belief is there. We know Clark Lea believes in the team. We know everyone everything that comes out of Vanderbilt, the belief is there. But can he, Diego Pavia, and the Commodores back all of that up? That's the goal. That's the guiding question for today. Can they back all of this up? And I think the answer is absolutely yes. They can back it up. Now, what that means, SEC champs, we'll see if they can back that up. But I do think the sustained success, which Clark Lea says they are chasing, and that's their goal, is to be a sustainably winning program. And I think they're very much on the way to that. And I think there's a lot of things that they have on this team. There's a lot of aspects to this team that I think is going to be that. And I did my most recent appearance on the Herb and Raj podcast. That's an Alabama show. And for some reason, I felt very, very good. And I picked the 10-2 record there. I think this team, I think this team is going to shock a lot of people. I really do. Because what it takes to be able to pull off something like this, yes, you have some talent. Are you the most talented team in the league? No, this is a really good league. This is a premier league. This is an elite league, the most elite in all of college football. So are you going to be more talented than everybody collectively? No. But I think that's where a lot of intangible things can back that up and can make up for the talent difference, right? Like you go roster to roster against this entire schedule, and you're probably going to look at most rosters and go, that roster's better. Okay, let's just be honest about that. That's probably the case if you just look at pure stats, right? But again, I said it on Herb and Raj. I've said it here all along. I'm not the stats guy. I'm the guy that's going to put context behind the stats, right? I'm going to be the one to tell you why, because you look at Auburn's roster and you look at Vanderbilt's roster. Who won that game last year? Vanderbilt. Who had the better roster overall? Auburn, right? Auburn arguably has a more talented roster this year than Vanderbilt. Overall, not going position to position, but overall. I would take Diego Pavia over Jackson Arnold. But, you look at the things that go into winning, and I think there's a lot of belief in what Vanderbilt has to do. SEC Media Days, they voted 11th in the polls. Like that's a pretty big jump. Coming into last season, they were ranked last. Not much credit there. not much deserved credit. But I think the credit they're getting is well deserved. But again, they have a quarterback that's inspiring a lot of this belief. They have a quarterback that believes this stuff, and it's not just crap. It's not just quarterback talk and he's saying what he thinks he needs to say. I think Diego Pavia actually believes this stuff, and he knows his team is good. He knows what they have. He knows the level of coaching. He knows what they can go and what they can do. And they have a much deeper roster this time around. So there's a lot of things, and the back half of the schedule sets up a little more favorably than it did last season. Because last season you were backloaded with, I believe it went Kentucky, by South Carolina, LSU, Tennessee. And then this year it's Auburn, Kentucky, Tennessee is your last three. So like I think you're set up pretty good for a nice little run in the back half of the season, because Auburn, don't know what they're going to be like, but Hugh Freeze is on the rocks there. And Kentucky, I just don't see it. And then Tennessee, that's actually right now, that's kind of a wild card game, because we don't know what Aguilar is going to do. We don't know what their roster really looks like. I haven't dove into Tennessee just quite yet, but I don't think they're as good as they were last year. And I think last year they took a massive hit losing to Ohio State the way they did. I think that put a really big dent in what they want to do. So I think it put a really big dent in their confidence too. But Diego Pavia had this to say. This stood out to me. He said, they asked him, what are the reasons? He said, well, number one, we have the talent to do it this year. He's talking about being SEC champs, right? He said, we have the talent to do it this year, which outside of the wide receiver position, I think that he's right. He said, two, we return a lot of talent. And three, this is probably the biggest reason, Eli Stowers and a few of the guys have brought everyone closer to Christ. So the faith aspect of it, which I think obviously can be overstated sometimes. And I think people like lean on that, like, oh, faith, but they don't really mean it. But I really do think this group does. Like Eli Stowers I listened to him on an appearance. I wasn't sure what show it was he was going on, but it was very faith-based. And I think there's, a spiritual aspect to this team that I think is very comfortable with themselves. I think the belief is there. I think they trust each other, which is a big part of it. And I think they know, because a lot of these teams that are trying to go from the basement to the upper levels as they climb the ladder, I think these teams that try to climb the ladders, I think oftentimes they're missing a lot of trust. I think that's the biggest characteristic of teams that try but can't, and teams that try and do. Teams like, Kentucky was once in this position. They were terrible for a long time. And then they hired Mark Stoops, and then they kind of made this this ascension, and now they're kind of going back down the other side. But like they made this ascension to where they were a viable team. Like they weren't going to be SEC title. They weren't going to be college football playoff, but they were like right there in the middle of the pack. And they were a team that, like, if they were right there in the middle of the pack, they're successful. And then they had chances. They had their chances, right? They were competitive. They were a competitive program in a time where they didn't have NIL. Vanderbilt has an advantage of NIL because Nashville's a really, really good market. So, but I think the characteristic going back to that I look at with teams that are really good, teams that were really bad, that fix this one element and become really good, and then teams that say or think they're fixing it, but they're really not. It's a facade. They're the ones that get knocked back down the ladder like that. They're the ones that can't sustain. And it's trust in each other, trust in the coaches, trust in the system. Trust, I think is the biggest word. And I think this team finally trusts each other. And I think they had that come to Jesus moment. They had that reckoning, I guess you could call it, against Georgia State, where nobody trusted anybody. It was just an awful game all around. Like, I don't think there was any redeeming quality from that game. And I think if you asked anybody on that roster, they would say the same thing. So I'm not saying anything that nobody in that locker room would be saying right now. But I think at that point they had to make a decision. And I think ultimately they did. They made the decision to trust each other. They became closer. They trusted each other that, hey, I know you can do your job. I'm going to do my job so that you can do yours. Right. And, if you make a mistake, I got your back. And you saw a lot of that. And the fact that they still lost 6 games, I think speaks more of like the roster just wasn't quite ready to compete yet. But you could see the trust. You could see the competitiveness. You could see the toughness. You could see all of those positive qualities, even in the losses. Because, you could have gone 2-10, but you also could have gone 10-2. You were involved in a lot of close ball games, which I think those can build you. And are you going to have those massive swings like that? No, probably not. But the trust is there, and I think there's something to that. So this team, again, I don't know what it is. I actually do know what it is. It's trust and it's faith. But I think a lot of people don't know. I think a lot of people just say, "Hey, Vanderbilt, that y'all were cute last year, but just stop." Right? That's kind of the general feel. But I think you're gonna. My prediction is this: you're going to see a team they're different, man. They're built different. The leadership is incredible, and I hope that these younger guys are watching. I really do, because when Pavia is gone, Eli Stowers is gone. That's going to be the true test of, hey, is this culture sustainable, or did it go out with them? So we'll see that, but this will be the chance for them to really, really put it in place. But speaking of Eli Stowers, opinions are real high on him. Everybody's real high on Eli Stowers, and they should be. We'll talk about why next. However, I want to talk about Gametime for a second, though, because they're a great last-minute option if you want to go to a ball game or a concert or something, right? You just have that itch. You want to go. Well, you got to open up Gametime, man. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without all the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you, right? Gametime makes it all possible. So Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop closer. You get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. So Gametime, of course, is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, and it makes it easy to browse the app and for exciting upcoming MLB games. I will say this, though. I wasn't looking for an MLB game. I was in Atlanta this past weekend, and I'm not an Atlanta United fan. I'm a Nashville SC fan because that's the hometown team, and they came to Nashville while I was living in Nashville. Atlanta United was not a thing when I was living in Atlanta, so sorry, you're the Atlanta team that gets left out of my usual Atlanta run with the Braves and the Falcons and I guess the Hawks. But it's those Atlanta teams plus the Predators and Nashville SC. And then you could throw in the Titans there too. The Titans are local, got to root for them, right? So I digress. I was looking up Atlanta United tickets because I was looking for something to do. Gametime, phenomenal zone deals, man. It was just right there in my face. They picked the best seats. It was great price. I didn't end up going, but had I went, it would have been a really, really good price. And the seat views were so clutch. I knew what I was getting or potentially getting myself into with that with that app. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen each and every day. If you need a second listen, Locked On SEC is the place to go. Again, you can find any of our shows anywhere where you get your podcast or on YouTube as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every single day. Appreciate you everydayers, by the way. Shout out to you guys. You guys make it happen, right? Chris Gordy does a phenomenal job. His coverage of SEC Media Days is second to none for this network. And, of course, the other 15 teams represented for this conference on this network are all incredible shows in their own right. So go check those out whenever you get a chance. But I want to talk about Eli Stowers again. You can never talk about him too much, right? Great dude, great player, bright future, not only in the black and gold, but in the NFL as well. He's getting the attention of a really, really prominent, I'm going to call him a peer at this point. Sort of a peer. At one point, they probably would have, I don't know how you classify it, but Benjamin Watson, SEC Network, had high praise for him. Benjamin Watson played the tight end position at the University of Georgia in the early 2000s. Early to mid 2000s, and had a nice career in the NFL with the Patriots and the Saints and the Browns, I think. And he had some really good things to say about Eli Stowers. And I don't know how you classify it. Is he a peer? Is he not a peer? I think he's peer-ish because he's not playing anymore, and Eli Stowers still is, but they played the same position. Benjamin Watson excelled at that position. Eli Stowers is excelling at his position. He said this. He came up with his offensive coordinator quarterback from New Mexico State. He's like a Swiss Army knife. He can do everything. He can catch fade routes, catch passes. He runs out of the backfield. He blocks. He does it all. My number one tight end in the nation, Watson said. So that's high praise and very legitimate. Everything that I've been saying, and it's like Benjamin Watson and I are the same person, right? I mean, how could you compare us, right? Benjamin Watson, me, it might as well be the same guy. Just kidding. I like Ben Watson. Shout out to you, Ben Watson. Swiss Army knife. That's my favorite adjective. And I'm glad Benjamin Watson has latched on to my favorite adjective. Okay. He's got to give me credit now. All right. I'm coming after you, Benjamin Watson. Got to give me credit. Just kidding. But I do say that a lot. Swiss Army knife. And it is absolutely true. Eli Stowers is the Swiss Army knife of the team because he can do everything. And every chance I get to talk about Eli Stowers and what he's going to do for this offense, he's going to be an igniter, right? What I talked about in the first segment, he leads the faith portion of this team. Diego Pavia is out there delivering the promos, telling the world, shouting from the mountaintops how good this team's going to be, how talented this team's going to be, how ready they are to make a run, how ready they are to be a great program. Clark Lea bringing it all together. But Eli Stowers is the one he's the faith guy. He's the guy that's bringing everybody together. He's making this locker room closer. He's bringing that trust by example, by actions, by words, all of that. He's bringing it all together. And that's what he does. That's his most important role. I think more important than any pass he could catch, any block he can make, any run he can make. I think the faith portion of what he does is going to be the most important thing for this team because it's going to create an atmosphere where guys are like, hey, I got your back, you got my back, and I know that. And that level of trust can lead to a lot of great things. It takes a lot of stress out of the equation because playing in the SEC is a stressful thing. And if there's a little bit of doubt, it's detrimental. Anybody can beat you in this sport and in college football, and most notably the SEC, right? Anybody can beat you. That little bit of doubt. They carry that doubt into Atlanta. Guess what happened? They lost, right? Every situation, in every loss, there was a little bit of doubt, right? I think they played hard. I think they played together. The Missouri game, I think they gave Missouri their best shot. Had a couple of bad bounces. But I think the only true game that you can say that there was no trust was Georgia State. But they had the trust, and they had a really successful season because they were able to bounce back off of those two losses and beat Alabama. They were able to bounce back after Texas and beat Auburn. In Kentucky. I think they played both those games after Texas. They were able to bounce back and win those games, right? And then they were able to bounce back after the 3-game losing streak at the end of the season to pretty much control the bowl game against Georgia Tech. They had a weird rain delay, weird weather delay But otherwise, I think they were well in control of that game up until that point against Georgia Tech. So they were able to be resilient, and it's all trust based. It's all relationship based. It's all and Diego Pavia revealed to the world that it's Eli Stowers that's bringing all that together. Pavia is the vocal leader. Stowers is the faith. Stowers is the I guess he's the glue. Well, I don't know how you describe him, but he's that guy. And then he goes and produces on top of that. He goes out and mosses somebody. So what he says holds value because he can do all that stuff. So that's why I think that's why I think this belief is real. Now, are they going to be SEC champs? I don't know that. I don't think so. As much as I'd love for them to be, I just don't think they're ready as a program quite. I don't think they're there yet. But I think the reason why I can say they're not there yet is because of Diego Pavia and Eli Stowers and everything rooted in their faith and belief in this team, and then everybody else buying into that. I think that's why I can say yet. Because 2 years ago, I could say they're not there. They never will be. I could have said that 2 years ago. I can't say that right now because I think they can be. Just not right now. Maybe. I don't know. It's an wide open year. So why not, right? So anyway, I think that's something that's going to be it's going to be interesting to see kind of how that develops, how those weapons outside of Eli Stowers develops. But it's all faith. It's all belief. It's all there. And if the other guys can believe it too, I think that can make up for a lot of talent differences. I think you play inspired football. I think that can make up for a lot. It helped Georgia State. I think if you can have enough belief in yourself that you cause doubt in the other team, there's where some wins come in play. And you have the ultimate igniter, and you have the ultimate believer. You have the ultimate. I really don't know how to describe this, but Eli Stowers is just the quieter version of what Diego Pavia. Diego Pavia is the vocal portion of the belief system that they have in place. So I'm really excited about that. There's some really interesting stuff happening on the defensive side of the ball too. I think there's going to be some things happening, some storylines that probably get no pub whatsoever. But I'm going to give it some love here. But you're going to find out what that is next. All right, wrapping up the show here, Locked On Vandy. Thanks for making us your first listen. However you got here, thank you. I don't care how you got here. I just hope that you stay, right? I think you can. I think you'll enjoy it. But talking about faith, talking about belief, talking about all that stuff, I think there's some interesting storylines defensively that lead to that lead to some of this belief. And there's more than just three, but these are the three that I really kind of want to talk about right now. And I'm not sure. I didn't put these in any particular order for a reason. I know it says 1, 2, 3, but these are kind of some things that I think are interesting defensively. The edge rusher, Keanu Coate, Miles Capers, and even Nick Rinaldi. I think Nick Rinaldi's kind of a utility defender. He can play inside and outside at the linebacker position, but I think the edge rusher position is going to be interesting, and here's why. Because they can get creative, I think. I think Clark Lea and Steve Gregory, I think, will be afforded because of some of these other things. I think they'll be afforded the luxury of being able to be more creative with how they rush the passer. And I think they've got some guys that can do it. Linus Zunk hopefully is coming back and going to be healthy on the defensive line. But I think your edge rusher position is going to be really interesting and really talented. Keanu Coate coming in from Alabama, looking for some opportunity to dominate. He was a 4-star coming out of high school. He's looking for an opportunity. Why not go to Vanderbilt? Why not go to an elite defensive system? Miles Capers did it last year. I think ran out of gas, but I think had a really nice year last year. Keanu Coate could provide that second layer of, I guess, rotation for him. And both these guys can be more fresh and have a lot of opportunity to do something special. Nick Rinaldi had a really, really nice bowl game, but he's a utility guy. He can kind of fit in a lot of places defensively, so I'm really, really interested in that. The battle for free safety, Marlon Sewell versus Dante Carter. Watch out for that battle. Not a whole lot to say right now. That will kind of take shape, but that's just something I wanted you to be alert for. But I really wanted to kind of talk about the cornerback room and how that's going to be affected, because I think when you look at Martell Height playing on offense, like I think that's going to influence a lot of decisions that are made on that at that position. And this is something that I think is of interest, and how the depth's going to play out and who gets what position. I think is going to be based on how much A, Martell Height gets on offense, and B, how well these guys play behind him. Because if these guys aren't playing well at all, Martell Height's offensive reps are going to go way down. If they are playing extremely well, they're going to be more liberal in using Martell Height. So I'm really excited about that. So here's kind of how it's now. This could, I think they're going to try some different things with some different areas, and some of this is going to be based on the fact that Mark Davis and Marlon Jones, who missed all of last year, how they respond coming in to their fall camp. You know, how does their body respond after being out all last year? But your field corner, boundary corner, I think that's how they're going to rotate it and shake it up. With your field corner being Martell Height as your starter, Jordan Matthews, I think, is going to be, and he's a bigger body. He impressed a lot during the spring, but I think he's going to be I'm going to call him your co-starter, because I think Martell Height is going to rotate enough offensively that Jordan Matthews is going to get a starter's share of reps. I just don't think he's going to be the first one out there on Saturdays, but I think you'll see him play a ton in a rotation that's going to be heavily favored towards him to give Martell opportunities to play offensively. Mark Davis and Trudell Berry, I think, are going to round out your field corner depth chart, with Mark Davis being able to swing to both the field and the boundary. Trudell Berry, not sure what's going to be. He's going to be kind of like that wild card. I don't know really what to expect out of Trudell Berry, but I think he's somebody that could possibly factor in. At your boundary corner, Jalen Lackey, I think, had a really nice end of last season. He's somebody that I'm really excited about at the cornerback position. He's going to come in with a lot of promise. Colby Taylor had a really tough year. Had a tough year, but he's huge. He's tall. He's got a lot of size. He's got that intimidation factor. I just think he can really, really make up for last year if he just plays smarter, doesn't get these egregious post-whistle penalties that he gets. The pass interference every once in a while, that's fine. I can live with that, because you're going to get those as a corner. But the egregious late hits, the tauntings, and then the miscommunications where he gets burnt, somehow he gets put on an island, which is not really his fault, but got to make a play there against Georgia State. You got to let us eke out of there with a very, very educational win and not a eye-opening loss. But Colby Taylor, I think, has a chance to really bounce back after a tough season. Marlon Jones, we'll see what he's got. Honestly, he was all conference at Eastern Washington. Don't know much about him beyond that, because just really haven't seen him. So I will get a chance to kind of examine that. But this is kind of how the depth plays out there at that position. So really excited about the depth of this room. I think that's the most exciting part about what this cornerback room can do. I think as they progress, as you see what they're able to do, what they're not able to do, I think will determine a lot on this defense, and will determine a lot of what Steve Greger can do from a pressure standpoint and from just how they overall construct their base coverages versus their more situational type coverages, where they get in a certain situation and this coverage is on. So the idea is to be as multiple as you can be, possibly, but not overwhelm the guys. And I think last year they were a bit overwhelmed at times. You could tell because there was wide receivers running wide open on a lot of occasions. And that usually comes from miscommunication. That usually comes from guys not knowing where they're supposed to be not knowing what they're supposed to be doing, and not knowing how they're supposed to be doing what they're supposed to be doing. So a lot of factors there, but a lot of it centers around the comfort level and the level of knowledge they have within the scheme, which I think will be much improved this year. I just think also with Clark Lea being the head coach this year, not the defense coordinator and the head coach, I think there's going to be a little bit more organization as far as, okay, I'm going to pair this coverage with this pressure. I'm going to pair this front with this coverage, and we're going to play these things, and we're going to get these guys on the same page at all times. And I think you're going to be able to have a better chance of doing that. And I think a lot of people are pointing to, and this is the last thing I'll say before we go, but I think a lot of people are pointing to the fact that Steve Gregory called the last 3 games, and the last three games were not good, especially from a third down standpoint. But you have to also keep this in mind too. You have to be fair. If you're going to say these things were atrocious, which there's truth to that. The stats say that they were pretty bad defensively, especially on third down. They were horrendous on third down. But the same can be said as like, okay, they fell apart roster-wise. That's not an excuse. It's a reality. They fell apart. And those guys just couldn't execute. They couldn't coach it. They couldn't call it. They just couldn't. It just couldn't come together like they wanted it to. There was flashes, but they just didn't come together like they wanted it to or needed it to. I think this year's a lot different. I think it's a little bit calmer of an experience. I think it's a longer term experience. I think these guys know and are comfortable with him at this point. It's not a sudden change from Coach Lea to Coach Gregory. It's been Coach Gregory all offseason, all spring, all summer, all fall camp, all season. It's going to be Steve Gregory. There's comfort in that. There's continuity there. So it's going to be a little more comfortable the situation. I think you're going to see a much better, more organized defense this year. So like, subscribe, add Locked On Vandy. Find us wherever you find your podcast. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, come back. If you didn't, tell me why, and then come back and see if I fix it. I promise you I will. I do take the feedback seriously. If you make it something to be taken seriously. If you're just going to talk crap and not give me anything constructive or make it personal, I'm not going to take it seriously. I'm just going to, yeah. So that being said, anchor down, peace out, behave yourselves. We'll see you back here next time on the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. Peace.